What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We have a quick YouTube exclusive for you guys today because it was a very tumultuous day in the Commanders community. To give you a timestamp as I do for all of my episodes, today is Tuesday, July 15, 2025. And earlier today, the boy Terry McLaurin, our beloved commander, the first commander before Jalen Daniels got here, broke his silence on his contract negotiations and why he didn't attend, mandatory minicamp and, the voluntary OTA sessions, or at least phase 3 of the voluntary OTA session. And everybody knew that it was, due to contract negotiations and him wanting an extension. And, instead of us hearing through the whispers and hearing from Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter, you heard from the horse's mouth today. You heard from the horse's mouth today, and Terry McLaurin, and ironically enough, he did it at his Eastern Motors photo shoot, right? So if we were to ever trade Terry McLaurin, this Eastern Motors commercial that he shot today might never see the light of day. And the reason why I'm talking about trading Terry McLaurin and why I never thought that I would put the words trade and the words Terry McLaurin in the same sentence is because if you see it on the screen, you see Terry McLaurin. He started the presser guns a-blazing. He said, "I'm pretty frustrated. I'm not going to lie." And that's how he started his press conference. And then it was just a rather scathing press conference from Terry McLaurin, who we know as the anti-diva wide receiver, right? This is the guy that we love, Terry McLaurin, because he's not your typical wide receiver, even though he produces like an elite wide receiver. But this was a scathing presser, to say the least. I listened to it live. B. Mitch and Finley carried it, and I was driving in my car, and I was like, oh, with just every sentence that he was spewing out his mouth. I think Grant Paulson did a good job of summarizing, all of the points, or most of the points that Terry had mentioned, with his frustrations from, the contract negotiations. He said he's not heard from the Commanders on his contract in over a month. He's frustrated and disappointed where talks were when they broke off. He does not feel valued or appreciated. He has been in touch with many teammates and they have their support. He referenced market being set and wanting to be paid what he deserves. He also said that he hasn't considered a trade yet, but he wants to be valued at, and it takes two parties to get a deal done. I think the words and the phrase that he actually said was, since we're getting down to, less than a week before veterans report to camp, the phrase that he used was, "It's crunch time. It's crunch for time for the Commanders and Terry McLaurin." And I hate to be the guy to say I told you so. No, I don't. But you come to Bleed and B&G for the most raw, uncut, and unfiltered analysis on your Washington Commanders, right? And if you listened to me over a month ago, check this video out. This video was made 6 weeks ago. If you listen to me in this video, only 477 of y'all did, and we'll talk about that later. But the 477 of y'all that tuned into that video, everything that Terry McLaurin said today was not a surprise. Everything that Terry McLaurin said today was not a surprise. And I titled that video that the Commanders have a Terry McLaurin problem on their hands. And Terry McLaurin basically told you what Adam Peters and the rest of the Washington front office regime is telling him at the negotiation tables. If Grant Paulson didn't actually touch on it, but if you can go back and listen to Terry McLaurin's presser, I would love to play it, but it was about 30 minutes long. It was very riveting. He got a lot off of his chest. You can hear his voice start to crack and start to tremble when somebody asks him, are they bringing up his age and his negotiation, his negotiation tactics and things of that nature. And I said in this video over a month ago that if you look at whoever you project the top 15 receivers to be, no matter where they fall in that top 15, I think the consensus of the top 15 is pretty universal. Terry McLaurin's in that top 15, and he's the second oldest wide receiver of all the wide receivers considered to be top 15 wide receivers in the NFL. only falling behind Terry McLaurin, right? And the reason that that's so important is because if Terry McLaurin is comparing him to the guys that signed contracts like a Garrett Wilson, who signed a contract yesterday, and he's only 24 years old, or Jamar Chase, who signed a contract for over $40 million at annual average value, and he's 25 years old, Terry McLaurin's going to find him in a rather peculiar situation because while he does produce at an elite level, he's not producing like Jamar Chase, right? And while he's producing, and he might even outpace Garrett Wilson in some statistics and in some aspects of being a wide receiver and being an elite wide receiver, he's 6 years older than Garrett Wilson. And no, 30 doesn't mean that he needs to be filling out an AAP card or anything of that nature. But the difference between the NFL and not even just the regular world, but the difference between the NFL and even the NBA and baseball is the NFL, they're paying you for what you're going to do in the next 2 or 3 years, right? The NFL is everybody says that it stands for not for long because, you know, you can be here today and gone tomorrow in the NFL, and it's due to like the volatility of the sport and things of that nature. So I understand why Terry McLaurin is holding out because he's very much more at risk of having a career-altering injury that alters his career than I am in my typical 9 to 5. So while I understand it, I'm not sure if I was the fondest of this tactic because, you know, he's still under contract for another season. But I told you guys, these are the things that Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, not necessarily Dan Quinn, but the guys that make up their front office, these are the things that Adam Peters and them are saying at the negotiation tables. They're talking about how, yes, Terry McLaurin is Mr. Commander. He's held it down for the Washington Redskins, the Washington football team, and the Washington Commanders. But I truly believe, and sourcing through the fan base and sourcing through local media and all their hot takes and their talks and things of that nature, I truly believe that Terry McLaurin is more valuable to the Commanders than he would be to any other team across the NFL. And I know you're saying that like, dude, he's only played for the Commanders in his career. But the reason that I say that is because if we step back and look at Terry McLaurin from a macro scope point of view, this is a guy that's never had a 1,200-yard season, right? This is a guy that can be taken out of games. We talk about the first game against the Philadelphia Eagles, the first game against the Dallas Cowboys. We can talk about the game he had against A.J. Terrell on that Sunday Night Football game against the Atlanta Falcons. And this isn't just the first season that Terry McLaurin has been schemed out and taken out of games. Now, I know in years past that you can put it on the quarterback, you can put it on the scheme, even on the offensive line for not being able to deliver him the ball. Well, he didn't really have those excuses to lean on last year when he was paired with top 5 quarterback play. And while he did produce, scoring touchdowns at an elite level, he still didn't crack the 1,100-yard receiving mark. So when you're talking about some of the elites, like a Jamar Chase, who did that as a rookie, like a A.J. Brown, who does that year in and year out for the past couple of seasons since he's been a Philadelphia Eagle, these are guys that this came out that Ian Rappaport actually said that Terry McLaurin's asking for a deal that's over $30 million average annual value. He didn't give a particular number. He just said that it's over $30 million. Well, if that is the case, guys like DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, and Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, these are the guys that are you're going to compare to. And even when I mention rattle off a name like DK Metcalf, that's like a albino snow bear in the desert when I mention the likes of like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and A.J. Brown. Like, it's levels to eliteness. And I think we have to understand that as Washington Commander fans. And I think that's what Adam Peters is telling Terry at the negotiation table. And Terry clearly doesn't like to hear it. Like I said, his voice was cracking. Terry's about to cry at the press conference today. Terry was about to cry at the press conference today, and you can tell that they over there at that negotiation table calling him old. He even got to the point where Terry was like, nah, all the reports from like Jordan Schultz, Ian Rappaport, and Adam Schefter over the last couple of weeks that have mentioned how Terry McLaurin is frustrated with how the contract negotiations are going and things of that nature, and the process is going. And you've heard people on local media hosts, former players, and things of that nature be like, "Oh, that's just agent speak. Oh, that's just PR speak, guys trying to figure out something, making a story out of nothing." What Terry said, damn near verbatim today. He was like, "Nah, all of those reports coming out about frustration, that was coming from me. That was coming from me." And while I think this press conference was a tactic by the agent, because why would you tell the local media to come to your commercial shoot if you didn't have something to say? I think that this is all a part of, the long game, which is contract negotiations in the NFL. And I think that Terry McLaurin and his agent honestly put on a masterclass today. While I might not be more fond of what he did today, one thing that I will say is that the fan base is now on Adam Peters in the front office's ass. The honeymoon period is over for Adam Peters. And while he's cooked, and I've been preaching let Adam cook since January 2024 when he became the general manager of the Washington Commanders. And he has done nothing but cook, and he hasn't let me down. He will quickly find out how nasty this fan base can get if he turns the cheek to one of their fan favorite players in a guy like Terry McLaurin. He will quickly find out how nasty this fan base can get. And while I don't expect it to get to the levels of venom that we were directing at Ron Rivera and Dan Snyder's and the likes of that, outside of Jaden Daniels, I don't think there's any other player that you can mess with, that you can get the fans to sour on you more than Terry McLaurin. So after today's presser, the ball is honestly in the Commanders' court. And while I think the Commanders do ultimately have all the leverage at the end of the day, because Terry McLaurin isn't in a contract year, he wants a contract extension, and he's technically under the team's control for the next 3 years with the way the franchise tag and things like that work out. I think that Adam Peters in the front office, these guys are on Twitter, these guys are on social media. They see that the fan base is ready to attack them with pitchforks and torches. You're ready to attack them with pitchforks and torches over the light of their beloved Terrence McLaurin. And I said it over 6 weeks ago, and I still feel like this. I'm leaning about 60-40 that a contract extension is not in the works for the 2025 season. If anything, they might restructure Terry's deal for this year where, everything is fully guaranteed. I don't know how it's going to work, but I don't see a contract extension. Because after Terry McLaurin's presser today, it raises the question, like, what is the talking point, or what is the negotiation point that is, having these two sides at such odds? Many people have speculated that was the money and the average annual value, but Ian Rappaport said he just wants over $30 million. So if you're giving him a DK Metcalf type deal, that's over $30 million. That's over $30 million. So when that report came out, I'm like, is it not the money? Is it the years? And I wouldn't put it past me, and I wouldn't put it being beyond the years with the way that Terry responded when they asked him about his age. He got very defensive, talking about 30 years is not old. They're almost acting like I need to be getting fitted for a walker and a cane. He got very defensive, as if that was something that he was just talking about yesterday. So we see the major negotiating points and the major talking points that they're using as the Washington Commanders and Adam Peters across the table from Terry McLaurin and his agent. So I'm curious to see what's the next steps, because Terry did mention that while he's pretty frustrated and he feels disrespected, it hasn't gotten to the point where he's considered asking for a trade or where he's considered playing elsewhere. But how long is it going to be until he does get to that point? Because the vets report the training camp next week. So if Terry McLaurin isn't there, then he's officially a holdout, and he'll start to get fined almost like $50,000 for every training camp day that he misses. And if we negotiate about money in the first place, I don't think he's up to just be losing $50,000 a day. But if he's willing to do that in hopes of a big payout and a big contract extension in the long run, I get it and I understand it. But if you paid attention to Adam Peters, he's coming from the San Francisco 49er tree, and they're known for playing hardball with all of their high premier, high price free agents. Trent Williams just came, a day before training camp last year. Nick Bosa got signed in August. We saw what they did with Brandon Ayuk last year. And while I love Terry McLaurin with all my heart, he hasn't put skin in the game like the likes of Trent Williams, right? I would argue that he hasn't even put skin in the game with the likes of Nick Bosa. Right? And if Adam Peters is coming from that tree, and I know he was the assistant general manager, but if he's learning a lot of these tactics and a lot of these, processes and things of that nature from his time with the, San Francisco 49ers, bro, they played with Trent Williams and Nick Bosa. Who the hell is a Terry McLaurin to them? And I'm not saying that I feel like that. But you come to Bleeding B&G for the most raw, uncut, and unfiltered analysis for your Washington Commanders. I told you 6 weeks ago that Terry McLaurin wasn't on blank check status. I told you that the Commanders were going to have a problem. This negotiation, specifically with Terry McLaurin, was going to be real peculiar and different than a lot of other wide receiver contracts set in the market and things of that nature. And guess what? 6 weeks later, all of these things that I said in that video have come to fruition and come to pass. So I say all this to say these are all the reasons why you need to hit that subscribe button, turn that notification on, and let me know how you feel about Terry McLaurin's presser today. How you feel about Terry McLaurin potentially not being a Washington Commander? What do you think is going to happen next in the days of the Washington Commanders, man? I'll check in on y'all on the flip side.